Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when Hollywood royalty collides with late-night satire over a question that cuts deep into American culture? On The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, what was supposed to be a lighthearted chat with Josh Brolin about his latest film took a sharp turn into uncharted territory. The topic? Are Hollywood actors out of touch with real America? At first, it sounded like a casual, almost playful debate, but what followed was anything but. Stephen, armed with his signature wit, pushed Brolin to explain why celebrities preach about values while living in multi-million-dollar homes. Josh, never one to back down, fired back with raw honesty and a surprising level of anger. The studio audience went from laughter to stunned silence as the conversation spiraled into one of the most heated late-night moments in recent memory. And just when you thought it couldn't get more intense, Josh did something nobody saw coming. This wasn't just an interview. It was a battle of worlds, Hollywood glamour versus everyday grit, and it left the internet on fire.
The show opened with the usual thunderous applause as Stephen Colbert strutted onto the stage, his trademark grin flashing under the lights. The energy was playful, the monologue sharp yet safe. Nothing hinted at the storm brewing backstage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Stephen announced with theatrical flair, "please welcome a man who wrestled Thanos and lived to tell the tale, Josh Brolin!" The audience erupted as Josh walked in, rugged and relaxed in a tailored jacket and boots that screamed cowboy chic. He hugged Stephen, took his seat, and for a moment it was the typical late-night rhythm. Jokes, anecdotes, and easy banter. "You're looking good," Stephen teased. "Is that from living in Montana or just Hollywood magic?" Josh chuckled, leaning forward. "Little bit of both, man. You trade smog for mountains, your lungs thank you." Laughter rippled through the crowd. They talked about his upcoming film, a gritty Western drama. Josh painted vivid scenes of desert landscapes and hard living. For viewers at home, it felt like two old friends swapping stories. But then, Stephen leaned in, his tone shifting just enough to signal a pivot. "You know, Josh, you're known for these rugged roles, real salt-of-the-earth characters. And you've moved out to Montana, right? Do you feel connected to the real America?" Josh tilted his head slightly, a glint in his eye. "What do you mean by that?" His voice was calm, but there was weight behind it. Stephen smirked, playing it cool. "Well, people say Hollywood is in its own bubble. That actors, big stars like yourself, might not really understand what everyday Americans go through. Rising costs, jobs disappearing, you get the idea." The audience murmured. It was subtle, but the tension sharpened, like a knife just nicking the surface. Josh rested an elbow on the chair arm, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. "I get the idea," Josh said slowly, "but I've worked cattle, man. I know what a hard day's work feels like." Stephen raised his eyebrows, feigning curiosity, but clearly poking the bear. "Sure, but at the end of the day, you go home to a ranch most people couldn't afford in 10 lifetimes. Doesn't that put you, maybe, a little out of touch?" A few nervous laughs from the audience. Josh gave a thin smile, but his eyes said something different. "You want to talk out of touch, Stephen? You sit here in a suit under studio lights telling people what real America thinks." The studio went still. Even Stephen seemed caught off guard by the edge in Josh's voice. For a moment they stared at each other, two worlds colliding under the glare of late-night TV. Stephen chuckled lightly, trying to diffuse it. "Fair enough, but we'll get into that after the break." Josh leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. The camera caught the look on his face, part amused, part ready for a fight. The air was charged now. Everyone in the room knew, when they came back, things were going to get messy.
And nobody could have predicted just how far it would go. The commercial break did little to cool the heat in the studio. If anything,
It simmered. When they returned, Stephen wore his signature grin again, but the tightness around his eyes told another story. Josh, on the other hand, leaned back casually, one leg crossed over the other, radiating a calm that felt like the eye of a storm. "So," Stephen began, tapping his blue note cards as if to reassert control, "before the break, we touched on this idea that Hollywood might be, insulated from the challenges regular Americans face." Josh tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Yeah, you said we're out of touch. Let's call it what it is." His voice was even, but it carried that quiet authority, the kind that makes a room go silent. The audience gave an awkward laugh. Stephen smiled, but his jaw clenched briefly before he recovered. "Well, isn't there truth to that? Look, you're incredibly successful. You make, tens of millions per movie?" Josh smirked. "You want to talk numbers on national TV, or are we talking about reality here?" The crowd erupted in nervous laughter. Stephen held his ground. "I'm saying there's a perception that people in Hollywood lecture Americans on values while living lifestyles most can't imagine." Josh leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked at Stephen. "Perception, huh? Here's the thing. You ever muck a stall, Stephen? Ever haul hay bales in July heat? Or wake up at 4 a.m. to move cattle because a storm's rolling in?" Stephen chuckled, shaking his head. "I can't say I have." "Right," Josh shot back, his voice rising just enough to sharpen the tension, "because that's my reality when I'm home. I didn't just buy a ranch for Instagram photos. I live it. I work it. So don't sit there in a tailored suit and tell me I'm disconnected." The audience clapped, louder this time. It wasn't the polite applause anymore. It was siding applause, the kind that said, "Finally, someone said it." Stephen adjusted his tie, smiling tightly. "Josh, I'm not attacking you. I'm just asking, when actors speak about politics or economics, does it land with people who are struggling to pay rent?" Josh's jaw tensed. "People listen because we have a platform, and some of us actually know what we're talking about. But you frame this like we're aliens on a spaceship looking down at Earth." "I'm framing it as a question. Do actors risk sounding out of touch?" Josh laughed, but it wasn't warm. "Stephen, you've been in this chair for over a decade, preaching your own version of reality? You think you're more in touch because you crack jokes about grocery prices in between ad breaks for luxury cars?" That one landed like a gut punch. The audience roared, some gasping, others cheering. Stephen's smile faltered for the briefest second. His hand tightened on the cue cards, knuckles white. "Look," Stephen said, voice now firmer, "I'm here to ask tough questions. It's my job. And right now, the question is simple. Are Hollywood actors qualified to speak for everyday Americans?" Josh didn't blink. "We don't speak for them, we speak with them. You want to know who's out of touch, Stephen? People who think blue-collar America doesn't want its struggles amplified. You think they like being invisible? You think they don't want their stories told?" The crowd broke into applause again, longer, louder. Stephen glanced toward the audience, then back at Josh. The tension was no longer under the surface. It was boiling over, and both men knew it. Josh leaned in, voice low but loaded. "I'll tell you what's really out of touch, Stephen. Mocking people for caring, for using their platform to say something that matters. That's a luxury, isn't it? To sit in this chair and sneer while the rest of us try to make a difference." The air in the studio felt electric, thick with anticipation. Stephen tried to cut the tension with a laugh, but it came out brittle. "Wow, I guess we're skipping the fun celebrity anecdotes tonight." Josh gave a tight smile. "Guess so." The audience laughed nervously, sensing that this was no longer entertainment. It was a clash of egos, values, and raw conviction. And one thing was clear. The next segment would decide whether this was just a heated debate or a complete meltdown. And as the cameras zoomed in on Josh's steely expression, one thing was clear. He wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever.
By the time the next segment began, the studio felt different. The laughter was gone. The audience shifted in their seats like they sensed something historic was about to go down. Stephen straightened his tie, pasted on that late-night grin, and tried to steer the conversation back to safer waters. "So, Josh," Stephen began, voice light but eyes sharp, "before this turns in the cable news at night, let's talk about your new movie. It's about, what was it, a rancher who—" Josh held up his hand. "No, we're not pivoting yet." The air froze. You could almost hear the producers in the control room panicking. Stephen blinked, his smile stiff. "We're not?" Josh leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes boring into Stephen. "You just asked me if I'm qualified to speak about real America because I'm an actor. So let me ask you, what qualifies you? Because last I checked, you've been sitting in this chair for 15 years, mocking everything from coal miners to truck drivers." Gasps rippled through the audience like a wave. The clapping started slowly. 2, 3 people, then spread into an uneasy cheer. Stephen raised his hands in mock surrender. "Whoa, Josh, buddy, we're just having a conversation." Josh's jaw tightened. "No, Stephen, you started this when you implied we live in some Hollywood bubble, sipping champagne and handing out opinions like party favors." His voice hardened, cutting through the studio air. "You want to talk bubbles? You fly business class from Manhattan to D.C. to schmooze politicians who wouldn't last 5 minutes fixing a broken fence." The audience erupted, this time with a roar. Some were laughing nervously, others cheering like they were at a prize fight. Stephen's trademark smirk wavered. For the first time all night, he looked rattled. But Josh didn't let him finish. "You are saying we don't struggle," Josh snapped, voice rising. "Because the second someone in my position says something about workers' rights or health care, guys like you roll your eyes and say, 'Oh, here comes another out-of-touch celebrity.'" He pointed toward the audience, his voice booming now. "You all cheer for us when we entertain you, when we bleed for roles, when we make you cry on screen. But the second we use that voice for something that matters, suddenly we should shut up and dribble." The applause was deafening. Some audience members were on their feet now, clapping and shouting. Stephen held up his hands, but the grin was gone. His voice dropped an octave, sharp and defensive. "You know what, Josh? Maybe people just don't want to be lectured by people who make more money in one movie than they'll see in a lifetime." The words hung in the air like a grenade. Gasps, then dead silence. Even the band stopped playing. Josh's face went cold. He leaned in so close their knees almost touched, his voice low, dangerous. "You think this is about money? You think integrity has a price tag? Let me tell you something, Stephen. Real America doesn't hate people with success. They hate being ignored. They hate being told their pain doesn't matter unless it trends." The audience erupted again, cheers shaking the studio. Stephen held up his hands, but the grin was gone. His voice dropped an octave, sharp and defensive. "You know what, Josh? Maybe people just don't want to be lectured by people who make more money in one movie than they'll see in a lifetime." The words hung in the air like a grenade, gasps, then dead silence. Even the band stopped playing. Josh's face went cold. He leaned in so close their knees almost touched, his voice low, dangerous. "You think this is about money? You think integrity has a price tag? Let me tell you something, Stephen. Real America doesn't hate people with success. They hate being ignored. They hate being told their pain doesn't matter unless it trends." The audience exploded again, cheers shaking the studio. Stephen opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His cue card slipped slightly in his grip. The control room was screaming in his earpiece, but he didn't seem to hear. Josh sat back slowly, eyes still locked on him. "You wanted a viral moment, Stephen? Congratulations, you just got one." The camera zoomed in on Josh's face, stone cold, eyes blazing, before cutting to Stephen's forced smile,
cracking at the edges. This wasn't a late-night laugh anymore. This was a battle, and everyone knew it was about to go nuclear. Next segment, someone might not be sitting at that desk. By the next beat, the studio was practically vibrating with tension. The producers had cut to commercial early, but when the cameras came back, the air felt heavy, electric. The band played a few upbeat notes, but even they sounded nervous. Stephen shuffled his cue cards, forcing a grin so tight it could have cracked glass. "Welcome back," he said, voice brittle. "We were just passionately discussing whether Hollywood actors should weigh in on real issues." Josh didn't smile. He didn't even blink. "Passionate? That's your word for it?" The audience chuckled, unsure if they were supposed to. Stephen leaned forward, determined to take back control. "Josh, look, nobody's saying you don't care about people, but when millionaires..." Josh's hand slammed onto the desk with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. The audience gasped in unison. "Stop hiding behind that word," he barked. "Millionaire, Hollywood, out of touch. You use those words like a shield to shut people down. You don't want actors speaking up because it makes you uncomfortable that someone outside your media bubble is calling out the same broken system you joke about every night." The applause was instant and thunderous. Some people stood, chanting his name, "Josh, Josh, Josh." The camera cut to a woman in the front row wiping tears, shaking her head like she couldn't believe what she was witnessing. Stephen's smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of irritation. "You think you're the voice of the people now? Come on, Josh. You live in Malibu. You wear custom boots that cost more than some folks' mortgages. How dare you pretend..." Josh stood, slowly, deliberately. The chair scraped the floor like a warning. The chant in the audience grew louder, almost tribal. He towered over the desk, voice calm now, but edged like steel. "You just proved my point, Stephen." He jabbed a finger toward the host. "When you can't win the argument, you go personal. You want to talk about my boots? Fine. I'll take them off and donate them tonight. But while you're mocking footwear, families can't pay rent, veterans can't get health care, farmers are losing land. And you want me to sit here and smile?" The studio exploded. People were on their feet, clapping, whistling, phones held high like they knew this would trend before the credits rolled. Stephen stood too, his face flushed now too. "If you hate this platform so much, why are you here?" Josh leaned in close, their faces inches apart. "Because someone had to walk into this room and remind you, comedy doesn't excuse hypocrisy." And with that, he turned. No goodbye, no handshake. Just a single sweep of his leather jacket as he strode off stage, the camera struggling to follow, the audience screaming like they'd just seen a heavyweight knockout. "Josh, Josh, Josh," they chanted as he disappeared behind the curtain. Stephen stood frozen, gripping his cue cards so tight they bent in half. His eyes flicked to the camera, searching for the punchline that never came. Finally, he muttered, voice flat, "We'll be right back." The screen cut to a commercial, but by then, it didn't matter. Clips were already flooding Twitter and TikTok, hashtags exploding, hashtag Brolin unleashed. Memes of Stephen's stunned face and Josh's walk-off spread like wildfire. By midnight, CNN, Fox, and every gossip site had the headline. Josh Brolin storms off Colbert's set in explosive clash, comedy doesn't excuse hypocrisy. And deep in the studio hallway, Josh Brolin walked out into the cold New York night, his phone vibrating with calls he didn't answer. He didn't need to. The message had already been delivered, loud and clear.
When the cameras finally cut, the damage was already done, and the internet made sure of it. Within minutes, clips of Josh Brolin storming off the Colbert set racked up millions of views. Hashtags trended globally. Hashtag Brolin Unleashed, hashtag Colbert Clash, and the ominous hashtag Comedy versus Truth. One viral tweet summed up the mood perfectly. Josh didn't just walk off, he dropped the mic, set it on fire, and burned the whole narrative down.
Meanwhile, talk radio and podcasts lit up with callers debating the big question. Are Hollywood actors out of touch, or are late-night hosts the real gatekeepers of what voices get heard? Morning headlines split the internet in half. Brolin explodes at Colbert. Comedy doesn't excuse hypocrisy. The Hollywood Reporter. Stephen Colbert humiliated as Josh Brolin walks off live show. New York Post. Did Josh go too far? BuzzFeed. By noon, fan pages were turning Josh's words into inspirational quotes on Instagram. When you can't win the argument, you go personal. Josh Brolin. But here's what nobody could ignore. That moment ripped open a deeper wound in American culture. Late-night TV once felt like a safe place for satire. Now, it's a battlefield where politics, identity, and celebrity collide. And this wasn't just about two men trading barbs. It was about who gets to speak and who decides when the mic gets cut. Even Colbert's own team looked shaken in the post-show recap. An anonymous staffer told a reporter, "We've had heated debates before, but this was different. He walked in ready to fight." As for Josh, by the time the segment aired, he'd posted nothing. Just one photo on Instagram, him walking down a dark street, captioned, "Silence speaks louder than applause." And that left everyone asking, was Josh a hero for speaking truth to power? Or just another Hollywood actor trying to look like a man of the people? And most importantly, did Stephen Colbert cross the line by making it personal? What do you think? Should actors use their platform to challenge narratives, or should they stick to scripts and stay out of the cultural crossfire? Drop your thoughts below. And if you want more explosive showdowns like this, hit that subscribe button, because this isn't just television anymore. This is the new front line of public debate. Stay tuned. The next clash is coming sooner than you think.